when Illinois might start looking into that a little bit more closely.
Well, I agree that those are, this is Paul Botts, Wetlands Initiative. I guess my answer to the question, Ted, it depends a good bit on who specifically is the intended potential or likely, not even intended, likely, possible potential readers or audience of this dashboard. If it's just kind of us, writ broadly, but then keeping them at these relatively, I mean, these are pretty basic technical measurements. But I'm thinking more of either others such as media or simply water, Chicago Wilderness, friends of Chicago Wilderness who aren't us looking at at this dashboard or coming across it or whatever, or for that matter, people that we might want to point to it. It would seem like we'd want to have a bit more sort of find a couple of measures that are more sort of real world direct impact. So for example, if there's maybe Illinois EMA, my IEMA has some standard measures by, I don't know what, county or township or whatever, of certain levels of flood event. And we could have in there, the last 10 years, there have been X number of X year flood events or whatever. I don't want to make stuff up, whatever might be already readily available. And then similarly, a sort of I understand this is about water quality in terms of the water itself. This is not a habitat or biodiversity hub. I get that. But some of the audiences who we might care about would sort of look at it that way. So it might be worthwhile having on here for streams, certainly. Maybe it's one of the standard indexes of biodiversity. Just pick one. There's a couple. Again, readily available, and be able to say that. And ideally, on all of these, the water quality and the ones I mentioned, be great if we had some way to indicate change over time. Even if just which way the arrow is pointing for a given stream or a given watershed. That seems pretty important. Again, really for us too, maybe, but especially for some other eyeballs.
Other comments? Thank you, Paul. That was really helpful. And also thank you, Mary. Beth?
Yeah. I'm going to lower this hand here. Right, there we go. I was wondering from Adam Flickinger about the natural solutions tool and whether any of these would be recorded or updated regularly within the tool itself that could be ported over to what we're creating here.
Are you asking whether any of these metrics would be recorded in the natural solutions tool?
Yes. Yeah. And if they are recorded, are they updated? Or what is the schedule for like updating if some of the things are there?
I don't think we have this level of detail of water quality indicators
Okay.
in the tool. It's more land-based, watershed land-based for those types of topics. We do have some water layers, but not water quality layers.
Okay.
Adam, you guys, sorry, Beth, I think one of the
Yeah.
things in particular is like the tree canopy inventory, which I know that you guys get from the tree initiative data set, right? So I guess like something like that, like how often would you guys have updates for that?
Yeah, we've been updating the tool every year. So at the end, towards the end of the year, we send out a survey to people who have been using it and others to gather layers that might be out of date. And then we take that information and then update it over the course of the summer.
Yeah, and I just was at a conference, a Green Teachers Conference, and there was a teacher from Waters Elementary School. So it seems like they're collecting a lot of data locally. So I don't know how or if that's something that would be something we could eventually publish here or share with other people too.
Yeah, if anyone ever has ideas of layers that you think should be included or things that are out of date, just feel free to email us and we'll add that to the list. Thanks.
Yeah, and so, per that, like this is, I think, one of the things that we're kind of trying to approach here is that there's a lot of groups that do have existing data portals that they do update regularly. Like, Friends does a lot of work to keep that running and keep it moving, obviously. So we definitely don't want to try to reinvent the wheel here, especially if someone is already kind of working pretty well at this. So I think like what we're kind of talking about here is like the version that the hub has is perhaps something where, if there are consistent measurements to be had, perhaps that's what is most obvious. But I think like a lot of it, we'd really like to be able to link to other people's resources, right? Like, so if you click on a section of the Chicago River, ideally it would come up that here's the link to Friends of the Chicago River and their their access tool. Here's the Chicago Departments of Transportation's River Edge access tool. Here's Current Waters microbial sampling, and here's Urban Rivers camera trap stuff and things like that. Like that is something. When we hop over to the Fox River, what does Friends of the Fox River have? And this can be, this can apply for things that aren't even, unified. Like if what a certain organization has, maybe it's the Root River in Wisconsin or whatever, and maybe there's a Friends of the Root River. If all they have is like images of, pictures of ducks or something that people have seen, I think getting to information like that or knowing who to contact there is the thing that I'm thinking is most useful for the most amount of people. Even if you're a casual observer and you just want to know more about the Root River, you have a way to. If you're more into research or more into executing projects, you would also know who to contact. So I think that's kind of the idea. I'm, just because there's also another aspect where I think everyone is doing relatively simple metrics. I think like Mary was saying, like grab samples in some cases, but other times consistent monitoring. So we kind of want to highlight where there's consistent and regular monitoring, but then also have an opportunity to look at who's got incidences of when there was a project done that would have captured these types of different metrics. So I think it's, it's a little complicated, but I think once we kind of have most of it just directing towards people's stuff that already exists, I think we can kind of pull commonalities out of that and make that a little simpler to kind of figure out who's is where. But that's like the way that I was thinking about it. And so Justin posted MWR, like there's 5, 6 different groups just around Chicago that have different, working on relatively similar things, but I don't know who to ask to get information about X, Y, or Z if I don't work with them a whole lot. So that's kind of the idea I think we're trying to get to here.
And Phil, this was my attempt to sort of aggregate some of those. All of these are linked, so we can put the presentation in the chat. I'll do that in a second, and you guys can play around with all these links. And if there are others, I think I don't know. Is it worth starting a spreadsheet or something to log all of these for the hub? I'm not sure what the best way to go about this is, but if you have any suggestions, this group, Phil, Beth, anybody else, that would be really helpful.
I do like the idea of a spreadsheet, but I'd also, if we're going to move to LinkedIn, why not publish a page with some of this stuff on there that we could click on and find these.
I can create a Google Doc right now and we can just drop that link in and people can start, we can add these links in to it.
Yeah, I think like the thing that just popped up in the chat, the tons of data DNR EPA approved. That like that's exactly the kind of stuff that I think we're looking for. And it doesn't have to be you know, it doesn't have to be complicated. I think maybe at the bare minimum, just like a link of how do I find that information or who do I contact to get that information? Like we've each done our different projects and things like that. So if you've done like work in microbes in somewhere in 2022, you know, at least letting people know that you've done that work and how to contact the person. Like, I feel like that's probably a helpful first step. With the idea that maybe we kind of build off of that, depending on if there's, you know, a lot of use. Yeah. And well, yeah, and same thing with Justin. So yeah, I think like maybe just getting down an Excel sheet, like things just down on paper first with like links to here's this or here's this study that we published or whatever, I think is a good first step, and we can kind of further organize it from there.
So one thing I just noticed is missing here. You have a lot of good sources, but the Fox River Study Group has been working on the Fox River in Illinois for quite a while and has a lot of data. They've worked with the Illinois State Water Survey, which is probably another group to maybe tag into. They have a lot of data there. And then, of course, there's a TMDL being developed for the Fox River in the Wisconsin part of Chicago Wilderness, where the Wisconsin DNR is gathering all the data to support a TMDL.
Anything else for this page before we move topics? I'm just sort of playing around with different links in the chat.
Yeah, good point by Adam. Conservation Foundation has a lot of data too that they routinely collect following projects like dam removals.
Other comments or observations before we move on? Okay, the last, oh, sorry, my fault. One of the last resources we wanted to bring to mind here is the CWA partnership does have a very basic grant tracking spreadsheet and project tracking spreadsheet, which we think that this group might be particularly interested in. If I stop share for a moment, pardon me, and then go, I probably could have done this from just in the thing. Let me try this again. Sorry, guys.
Do you have the link? Do you have the link?
I'm working on it, Laura. Hold
Okay,
on.
thanks. No problem.
That's what I was doing. Okay, so there you'll see in my screen there are ideas for cafes in the spreadsheet. There's a tab for funding opportunities that we do our very best to keep up with, and color code by different entities. So there's a code for federal, there's a code for state and regional. But we have all of these grants in here if you're interested for partners. And then this other tab here has each of the goal teams. And then you scroll down to find water, which is here. And we put just a couple of very basic groups ideas in here, one of which I will speak about next. But if there are water projects that you guys know of that you want to put in grants for, or think that there are coordination needs, this is a great place to record that work. And we just wanted to make you aware that this exists as a resource, so that if a grant comes up, we're sort of ready to go with the basics. It's really hard for Laura and I to sort of go after these larger grants, but if there's like a good group of us that know what we're doing and have a great project, then if we start it here, this is a really helpful place. So this just gives the team name, who you are completing the idea, what the name of the project is, a brief description, number of acres impacted, if there's land acquisition, a rough cost, who the partners would be, how much federal funding you're requesting, if there's a match. This is a pretty exhaustive source of information, but it also, as you can imagine, really helps when you're down to the wire on a grant and something pops up suddenly, and you can go to a resource like this and just sort of plug and play with some subject matter experts. So we do have this as a resource, and I wanted to make you guys aware that this exists. Because again, I think that this might be helpful for this group if there's a partner project that you want support on, things like that. Any questions here? Awesome. And then I will share again. Let's see. So I think it's this one. We'll go back to here. On a second. Okay, can you guys see back to the PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, this is the last thing that I'll get into today, and then we can turn it over to Beth to talk about Water Week. We are trying to work on a regional water conversation that is bigger than the Chicago Wilderness Alliance water region. Before Phil and Beth stepped up to valiantly lead this group, we had heard that and met with other folks in terms of looking for a leader, that there were coordination efforts up higher in the lake, and that there's a hole in the lake that's roughly the Chicago Wilderness geography in terms of coordination. So one of the things that I have done is set up a quick doodle poll for anybody that is interested in this conversation. And I'll put that poll in the link so that if you are interested in the conversation and we missed you, you guys can put names down and register if you're interested in participating with this. And again, this sort of takes us out of our watershed, but it looks at sort of Lake Michigan wide issues. My guess is we will dovetail this into this group at some point, but we're not quite there yet. And that's why we're not, I'm mentioning it here, but right now it's sort of another thing until we get some consensus and know what to do with it. So if you're interested in this conversation, I will stop the share for a moment, and I will put this doodle poll in the chat for you. I thought I had it in the notes. I do have it in the notes. There we go. Go into the chat. Okay. Yes, Angela has talked to me about this, Jeff. Share, we'll go back to share again. And then yeah, let me go to share. So this was something that Beth was interested in gosh, sorry guys. There we go. That Beth was interested in promoting, and Beth, I brought up a couple resources for the group and you to talk about in regards to this.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just thought if people were here on the call that were involved with Water Week and wanted to say something about what you as your organization were doing, I think myself, I always love like having an opportunity to hear about what our partners are, our participants in the calls are doing. So, and I put the link for the Water Week in the chat also, if anybody wants to click on it. But does anyone want to talk a little bit about what they're doing during the week? Generally, just so everybody knows, I can't really share my screen, but this is a event that's happening across Chicago. It's for a whole week. You can get a ticket. Most events are free, but you can kind of see what a lot of people are doing around the Chicago area. So does anyone want to talk about what they're doing for Water Week? And if not, that's okay too. So yeah, I can try to share, if you want me to share my screen. Or if you want to, Ted, if you just want to put what's in the chat on the screen, that would be great.
From the slideshow I just had.
Yeah, I'm not seeing your slideshow for some reason.
But he stopped sharing. You can
Okay.
share your screen, Beth. There's no problem.
Okay, I can go back to this. Let's see. See, want to zoom. Okay. So I don't know, I guess a show of hands, how many people are thinking they'll go to some of this? Anybody? Yeah, a couple of us. Yeah. Yeah, Urban Rivers has a tour, a wetlands initiative. Yep. Are there any things I'm interested in asking you guys as well? Are there things you'd really recommend that we go see?
I would recommend MWRD's Deep Tunnel Tour. Those are really cool. I've been on them before.
Last year, we participated in NPC's event, which I think is on the Friday. And last year they did it sort of like a workshop where there's discussion groups, and it was really interesting. So we'll be attending that again. And then I saw it on there. I forgot if we did that again this year, but Chicago River Day happens anyways, but it just happens to overlap with Water Week. So
Yay.
all invited to be part of Chicago River Day cleanups if you want.
And what day is Chicago River Day of the week?
It's on Saturday,
On Saturday. Okay, cool.
May 11th, 33rd annual.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you guys weigh any of the trash, or what are metrics that you use to kind of talk a little bit about that?
For years, we've worked with researchers from Loyola University to analyze some of the trash, not only on Chicago River Day, but for other cleanups. And we have all sorts of statistics about what type of trash is common, you know, how much, that kind of thing. So types of plastics and things like that.
That's very cool. Yeah, I've done a lot of Adopted Beach and we always get so much trash and it's so incredible because you don't really see it in the same, I would imagine, with the river. That's great. Yeah. And Phil, what about the Urban Rivers Wild Mile Walking Tour? What can you tell us about? What will people learn if they go to it?
Oh, you'll learn so much. We actually just saw a woodcock and a loon
Uh-huh.
down the Wild Mile just today, which are both very cool. don't really see them a whole lot. So yeah, just a walking tour, not all of the plants. Probably have marsh marigolds and the Iris virginica coming up a bit, but you're not going to be too busy with the greenery, but definitely a sight to behold. Yeah.
Cool. So if anybody else has things, feel free to share. But I just thought it would be, if we didn't already know about it, just kind of fun to know that that's coming up.
And Jeff, you mentioned U.S. Water Alliance. I've not heard of that.
Yeah, it's something that's been popping up in my email, and they have an Imagine a Day Without Water every year, and I've used that in, some of our education outreach stuff with the Fox River Ecosystem Partnership. So it's a national group that might also be of interest to this group.
Let's see. Question about existing gap in this group's representation from Southeast to Northwest. There's definitely, yeah. So, and Ted, that conversation is about the broader Great Lakes, right? Like they have both sides, except that there's no kind of unified group around the basin of in the south there.
That's right. So there are groups up in Milwaukee and north that talk to Michigan, sort of, South Holland up, but they recognize that for the Chicago wilderness geography, there's sort of a hole in their network at the bottom of the lake, and so I think the idea behind that conversation is to get us connected with lake-wide partnerships and lake-wide efforts. And so we'll have some folks from outside of CWA hopefully at that meeting that are doing that work, so that we can talk about how to coordinate and think about lake-wide strategies and projects, in addition to our own geography needs, right? So that's what's going to go on at that meeting. If that helps.
Cheryl?
Yeah, living in Northwest Indiana, I can say that he should contact Victoria Wittig, Wittig, with the Northwest Indiana Urban Waters.
She has been sent an invitation. Thank you, Cheryl.
Good. On Thursday, the League of Women Voters is having a big sort of waters meeting. We've got Joel Braumeyer speaking and Victoria will be speaking. So, and we got 12 different environmental groups from Northwest Indiana tabling. So, it's going to be kind of like a summit. If I find out anything else, I can let you know. But Victoria, she's got a lot of good stuff going on. Also, the people from NERPC, I think, and Leslie Dorworth, she might
Yep.
be in Illinois, but they're going to be there and they would be really good people to invite. They're way more technical than I am. We're pretty much for advocacy. We write a lot of letters in League of Women Voters, and we try and get our red state legislation to look more bluish, but it's really hard. So that's all.
Oh yeah, Dean, with the federal funding challenges to conservation. I mean, Paul, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you're willing to talk to anybody that'll listen, but I mean, what some of your projects, is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Is there just
Well, there's two layers to it. One is about the pausing or freezing of current grants. That has eased up a bit, not through any new change of attitude from the White House, but simply like we had a big one that was in fact paused and made the news at Medewa National Tallgrass Prairie. But that has been unpaused just a couple weeks ago, and our crew is back out there now. It's more complicated than that. We're not caught up on the reimbursements yet, et cetera. But apparently, and NIFWIF thinks, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation believes that those reimbursements are now flowing, and that seems to be true. And the same, in the Calumet, all our Calumet work on both sides of the state line, we've had reimbursements be slower. We've had some radio silence and some weird stuff like that, but nothing has actually yet stopped, and we don't think it's gonna. But all of that is distinct from sort of a next step of funding, and particularly in the Calumet work, the plan all along, and in fact, we sort of had some at the federal agency level, almost not exactly pre-approval, but definitely very promising pipeline kind of moves towards some relatively significant federal funding to carry out some relatively heavy lifting in multiple places in the Calumet. That all is completely unclear now because the federal budget picture. I'm told that the real nitty-gritty, arm wrestling kind of negotiation over a federal 26 budget starts really in June. And this also, we're also, because of our farm project, such as the thing that's behind me on the screen, working with farmers, the whole farm bill thing is, of course, is completely central to us. And all our farmer friends and organizations we're working with are very upset and really don't know what the hell's going on, and nobody can tell them. So the uncertainty really has sort of the focus of the existential uncertainty has really sort of shifted a bit forward in time to being federal 26 and beyond. But I say all that advisedly because we all know, I was just talking with our great partners at Open Lands the other day about the Medewan thing. We have some private restricted dollars that we've been given as a backstop there, which, knock on wood, we haven't had to tap yet. But we've told that donor that we're going to just leave it alone and be ready to tap it because it's only the second week of April. And we just expect that there's going to be more creativity from the White House. They haven't given up on any of this. And it's, this dizzying array of court rulings and counter rulings and appeals and so forth. You can't even keep track. And the NIFWIF staff, of course, are intermediaries themselves. They control nothing. They decide nothing. So it's very weird. And so we just don't know at this point, but we are moving forward. I'm happy to say none of our work is literally actually stopped as I speak, which is a change from a couple of weeks ago.
Well, it's a good comment. We really don't know what's going on. Things change from day to day. I can tell you in the farm conservation world, the American Farmland Trust has laid off or furloughed 47 people because of the grant problem they're having. And they're not alone. Districts are having the same problem. Grants are being withheld. There's not payments coming out. The future, we may not get some grants renewed in the fall, so there may be some folks that we have to let go. So it's really an unknown. So I guess my first message to you all is, if you're not talking to your legislatures, your federal legislatures, you need to start speaking up. Particularly the Republican ones. They're the ones who are calling the shots right now. We all need to speak up on a common voice, ask for the SB programs to be restored. The other part of the problem is the next budget. Who knows what's going to happen on that? There's so many moving parts. But the problem, I think, as just commentary, I think we kind of sat back our laurels for so many years here. We didn't really stay in tune and engage with the legislators on these issues. And so things have kind of fallen by the wayside. So that's not all give up. Let's start getting in there, talking to your legislatures, start speaking up on behalf of this stuff. It's just not farm bill dollars. I understand the EPA lost, 388 people? Aren't those folks you rely on for your sources of grants? I'm sure the grant program is starting to tighten up as well. So it's all the way around. Things are changed. So again, speak to your legislators. And let me put a thing in now too for the state level. The districts had their funding cut in half last year. They're trying to get it restored. back to what it was. The problem is here in Illinois, we have had a projected budget deficit as well as a $2 billion withhold, if you will, by the feds on grants. It's going to make for a very interesting, tight budget here all the way around for whatever program you want to look at. So it's got a ripple down effect. So, anyways, thanks.
Anybody else have any grant or funding clarity or experiences that they want to share?
Us at Lake County in Indiana, we've got federal highways money for trail projects that are still all active yet. We've got a few couple NIFWIF grants with the Delta Institute in Chicago, and those are still active yet. We've got a couple NOAA grants for land acquisition, Lake Michigan Coastal Funds with DNR. Those are still good yet. The only issue we're having is with EPA. We've got a Great Lakes Restoration Initiative grant for Gibson Woods Nature Preserve in Hammond, and we have not heard from EPA now in 2 months. So we're hoping it still happens, but still waiting to hear from them. So hopefully.
Yeah, I wonder if anyone out there, we've been kind of obviously proceeding as if business is going to be usual and applying for things still. I've definitely noticed there's a distinct lack of grants from the federal side compared to this point last year. But, we got some interesting. I wonder if anyone is starting to change the way that they write these grants, because I think in our mind, one of the things that we've been focusing on with a lot of these applications is benefit towards disadvantaged communities, and in some cases, we're being told, don't worry about it. Generally, if it's like a pass through from feds to whoever to us, mostly they're just like, don't worry about it. But there have been people who have been advising us to omit some language entirely, which doesn't really change the project. Just really, I'm interested if anyone has been rethinking the language and the way that they're applying to any of these grants just yet.
We're only hearing the second one, Phil. About there's multiple lists. There's a farm version and there's a environmental version. There's multiple lists going around of words that appear to be frankly used as keyword search terms at the other end in the White House or Doge or some goddamn place. And we're being told bluntly off the record, of course, by agency staff, don't use these words. Plain and simple. If you want to have hope of getting the grant, whatever you're applying for next, don't do it. Keeping in mind that it's only April of 2025, right? So yeah, that's what we're being told is where we are.
By the way, I'm going to speak up here for Indiana right now. There's a big push by INCA to get funding for conservation and environmental work in Indiana. There's a call of arms out there, if you will, to do action alert. Harshini, can you speak to that perhaps in Indiana?
As it pertains to what, Dean? Sorry.
Funding for conservation, for land preservation, and funding for districts and parks and whatnot.
So for the state, if you're looking at Indiana State House, I would say probably Indiana conservation voters. I know that there was a bill that we did sign on to that unfortunately did not. Basically, we had an amendment for one of the House bills at the State House to put in some of these conservation amendments to basically make sure that there was an allocation of money every single fiscal year at the State House to help projects, including the Benjamin Harrison Fund, things like that. But unfortunately, they didn't accept any of our amendments. So at the State House, we don't have anything right now, at least for this session.
If I get a chance, I'll forward to you what the Indiana Conservation Alliance has sent out there. Right now, it's the final budget bill that I've got some ideas they're trying to fund. And one of those ideas I'm familiar with were in that budget bill. So I'll forward that to you. Maybe you can do an action alert, get the folks of Northwest Indiana more.
I know in general, for those of us in Illinois that have been following the budget issues, IEC, who is a great partner, is basically saying anything that has money attached to it, we're not willing or as interested to promote as things that are resolutions or that move the needle without having money attached. And that in our neck of the woods is why I haven't seen a whole lot of water legislation outside of Paul's baby in the wetlands bill. But one of our bigger priorities is working with land trusts to allow Native Americans to hold easements because there's no money attached to that, and that's sort of seen as a generally good thing. And so if you're curious, that's sort of Illinois' conservation strategy is advance things that don't need money but still move the needle, for what that's worth.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm on the Prairie State Conservation Coalition Board and its policy committee, and there's also things like clarifying, in we hope a good way, river access, that is to say recreational access of rivers. Again, there's no specific money involved in that. The wetlands bill has a fairly small amount of money, tiny little amount of money. We think tiny, the DNR thinks less tiny, but but it's not fundamentally a funding bill of a whole new program. There have been a couple of small bills passed that on paper started new programs in recent last couple of sessions that had very small initial allocations. So yeah, I do think that's what it is. And the state is looking at some pretty big budgetary stuff to solve. Although the state has done better in recent years than it did before that. But yeah, that is basically our strategy. I don't know that we've ever said it out loud quite as bluntly as Ted just did, but that is de facto our strategy, yes, or part of our strategy.
Fun
Beth
times.
and Phil, I recognize we're near time.
Yes.
I don't think this group has a meeting until September again.
Wow.
Yeah. I think we did that so that maybe there could be a summer field trip or something like that.
But he wants to do a summer outing. It's a couple hours drive, but you want to be along the big water and see some wetlands and talk hydrology and all that stuff. The Dixon Waterfowl Refuge is always available, and it's got a bunkhouse, farmhouse with a table to meet around and a functional kitchen to make lunch at. And since it's all ours, we don't have to go through any hoops to have folks use it. We're happy to have groups, up to maybe a couple dozen people. It's not really much of a facility larger than that, to be honest. But up to a couple dozen people, it's a nice place. It's about, on a good day, about an even 2 hours drive from the loop, put it that way.
That sounds
That
awesome.
is tempting. That is
Yeah, that does. Maybe we should put a small survey together for the group and see what people want to do.
Yeah.
And that seems like a great one. If anybody else has ideas they want to share, we can kind of take those too. But yeah, that could be something we could even do in September, I would imagine, once, because it's still a little bit warm, but yeah, I love that idea.
And I think since we don't meet until September, we probably will send emails out with the conversations with the hub in terms of metrics and what we can plug in there. And I think if you're interested, please let us, Beth, Phil, myself, Laura, know if you want to participate in those conversations. They're open, they're not set to just the four of us insiders. So the more the merrier in my book for that, because great minds make greater output. Oh, I did not. Let me do that. Thank you, Justin. Go.
Great, yeah, and you know, I can check in with folks as things are kind of added to that data sheet. If there's any kind of investigation, I might just reach out to people and email you and just make sure everything's looking usable, and then I think we can just build off of that over time.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Beth.